Everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the first half of November and the new moon that we have coming up in Scorpio on the 7th. Now, there's quite a lot happening this month. In various ways, we have Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, and the transiting nodal axis all changing signs, and we have Mercury and Venus changing direction. So this will give the feeling of busyness, it will give the feeling of moving in one direction and then changing and moving in another. So it's going to be quite a choppy month, I think, November. So one of the main things that is changing is the transiting nodal axis. Now, this has, for the last 18 months, been moving through Leo and Aquarius. And those are two quite social, outward-going signs. But now, they're shifting. Remember, the nodes always move retrograde. They're shifting into the signs of Cancer and Capricorn. So they always move in opposite pairs through the zodiac. So see where Cancer and Capricorn, the signs of Cancer and Capricorn, are in your chart. See which houses they fall in. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if you check out this link above, that will take you to my store. You can buy a two-part video series that will explain everything to you and what this means. But where Cancer and Capricorn are, not only is that where the transiting nodal axis is for the next 18 months up until the 4th of June 2020, but it is also where the eclipses are going to be falling. So those houses, whichever pairs they are for you, they are going to be areas of change and activity over the next 18 months or so. And the nodes actually shift on the 6th of the month. So Cancer and Capricorn, what can we say about those signs? Well, in contrast to the more outgoing and social Leo and Aquarius, both Cancer and Capricorn tend to be more conservative and more inward looking. They like to preserve what is. Cancer is very connected to your emotional security, your feeling of being with your family or your close circle of friends, feeling cozy, feeling safe in that circle. And Capricorn is about your financial security or your practical security as well. So there's this feeling coming in of protecting what is. Of keeping in control of what is. And that isn't just personally, that's going to be happening nationally as well. And really, this is in part reinforcing the fact that we already have Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, and that is to do with borders, walls, territories, nationalism. So, we've got some very obvious examples of tightened immigration policies in the US. We've got a very obvious example of Brexit. And in Europe, they've had a whole series of elections which are giving additional power to more nationalistic parties, people who want to close the borders of the country. So we already have that theme, and this shift of the nodal axis into Cancer and Capricorn is really emphasising that. But it is wonderful for really cultivating your family and cultivating your close set of friends as well. Now, another thing that's interesting, the South Node in Capricorn, this is our collective past, the way we've used our energy in the past. That is, and Capricorn in general with Pluto and Saturn there as well, this is to do with the theme of the abuse of power or too much power. If you go back in history at another time when the South Node was moving through Capricorn, and I've mentioned this in newsletters previously as well, in 1517, for instance, when it was in that position, Martin Luther was very much challenging the overpowerful church at the time. So you may ask yourself now in society, what institutions or corporations or governmental bodies do you feel are overpowerful? Because certainly in many societies we have a top-down, a vertical structure to society. I've taught and written about this a great deal too. But this shift of the nodal axes, and also Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, is about increased accountability, integrity, and transparency. And It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take a bit of time because this theme is going to build into 2020. But ultimately, as planets like Jupiter and Saturn at the end of 2020 and Pluto in the end 24, early 25 move into Aquarius, that is really speaking of an Aquarian vision of a much more horizontal structure to society where there's mutual respect and we don't have this top-down structure, but we're going to have to go through a little bit of time before we get to that. But keep the vision. That's where we're headed. So that's one of the big changes happening in early November. One of the others is Jupiter is changing sign. Now, Jupiter has a 12-year orbit, so it essentially spends a year in each sign. So it's moving into its own sign of Sagittarius. Now, it will have done this 12 years ago, pretty much to the month, November. So see where Sagittarius, the sign, sits in your chart, which house area. Go back 12 years and see what was happening. Remember what was happening for you 12 years ago, because you'll get some kind of an echo, not necessarily a repeat, but some kind of echo of what was happening for you then. So this can give you this can kind of prime you for what you can expect, what's coming up this time, although of course the whole world has evolved since then. Now, if you have the sun, the moon, your ascendant, or even several planets in Sagittarius, this is potentially very good news for the next year, because, as I say, Jupiter stays in that sign for a year, and it's very happy and comfortable in its own sign of Sagittarius. So if you have sun, moon, ascendant, or emphasis in Sagittarius, this can give you a year of expansion. Jupiter's the planet of expansion, of personal growth, of many opportunities coming your way. And again, go back 12 years to see what was happening for you. So now, important to say that Jupiter is the planet of expansion. So in my experience, about 95% of the time, it is beneficial. It brings success, abundance, more opportunities, more recognition for you. If it is transiting an area which is problematic for you currently, it can just expand the problem. But the vast majority of the time, in my experience, it's very, very positive. Now, areas that I believe will be emphasised during the next year up until December 2019, when it moves into Capricorn, are going to be travel. I think travel will be speeded up enormously. Space travel. I think there'll be huge advances in space travel over the next year. Morality and ethics are going to be really big ones, I think, and kind of linked to that, your belief system. That could go through quite a period of questioning or change over the next year, or being challenged by others. Religion is a very big one as well. Writing, publishing come to the fore with this. I think one of the fundamental things that we're going to be looking for is more meaning, because Jupiter and Sagittarius are all about meaning. So, for instance, if Jupiter is going to be transiting your 6th or your 10th houses, the work houses, you may start to feel you need much more meaning in your work. It isn't just enough to earn a living. You really want to make a difference in the world. So the sense of meaning is going to be much more important, I think, for us all, and particularly if you have any emphasis in Sagittarius. But this can bring wonderful things. I mean, if Jupiter is transiting either your 3rd or your 9th houses, this can be a fantastic time to study or write or publish or teach. So wherever it's transiting in your chart, and that's why it's so important to know your own birth chart, because it will give you so much more meaning, is self-improvement. It's self-improvement and expansion in that area of life. Another area which I think is going to become very important over the next year is the freedom of the press. Jupiter in Sagittarius is the freedom to speak, the freedom of the press. It's mutable fire. It has no boundaries. It's not contained. However, we have this big polarity going on, and that will continue to go on, certainly for the next year, of if that is freedom of the press, and you can see events in the news right now, how that whole area is being set up. It'd be very interesting to see what unfolds over the next few weeks. Equally, Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn are about greater social controls. Greater controls, greater laws on how society operates. And we can see this is starting to happen in the social media area, for instance. And that's going to be the swing, the polarity between do we continue to have a great deal of freedom of speech, or is that going to be challenged in certain countries, and what does that mean for democracy, etc. I mean, it's a very, very big debate, which I think is going to be fascinating to watch, and that's why this time is very important to see how that setup is unfolding. Now, what is very interesting as well is that Jupiter, when it entered Scorpio last October-November time, that was virtually to the day, the time that the Harvey Weinstein sexual harassment scandals came out, and it was the beginning of the MeToo movement. And that movement has gained power and profile through the year that Jupiter has been in Scorpio. It is now coming to the very final degrees of Scorpio, and I was just wondering today, how is that particular theme of sexual harassment? Scorpio is all about sexuality and sexual rights and sexual bullying and sexual harassment. How is that theme going to come to culmination or completion as it moves to the end of Scorpio? And just this morning, I heard a very interesting interview by activist Jane Fonda on BBC Radio, talking about a new campaign that is a development and evolution of MeToo called Time's Up. Time's Up. And she was saying, okay, we've heard all about MeToo, what's been happening to women. It is now time to do something. And several Hollywood celebrities have got together, and they've so far got a legal fund of, I think, $700,000 to help poor women who have been sexually assaulted to take their cases to court. And it's very interesting, of course, because with Jupiter entering Sagittarius on the 8th, Sagittarius is all about the law. So we can see how this theme has moved directly from Me Too, sexual harassment, now to a different legal status with Time's Up, as it shifts from those from one sign, Scorpio, into another, Sagittarius. Really absolutely fascinating. Another thing to be aware of, and this doesn't really become a big issue until mid-2019, is that with Jupiter in Sagittarius and Neptune in Pisces, and remember Jupiter was the ancient ruler of Pisces, these are two highly idealistic signs. Neptune in Pisces is quite devotional and can easily give oneself over to a higher being. Very connected to oneness and the sacredness of us all. And Jupiter in Sagittarius can be quite drawn in as well to gurus, cults, that sort of thing. So both signs, when Jupiter is in Sagittarius and Neptune is in Pisces, although it's highly idealistic, sometimes those signs can lack discrimination. So we should be very aware of cults and gurus and that sort of thing, but that's more towards mid-2019. We should have our antennae up. What's also interesting is that starting in November, not until the second half of the month, in fact, but we have a whole run of lunations, full moons. I think it's 5 of them at 0 degrees of the sign, and then 1 at 29 degrees of the sign. Now, 0 degrees and 29 degrees are known as critical degrees of a sign, because obviously 0 is the entry point, it's a new beginning, it's a new development of whatever's been happening in the world. But 29 degrees is the culmination. It can sometimes emphasize the sort of the less positive aspects of the sign that it's in. And at this time, not only do we have this run of lunations coming up, 0 of the signs. By the way, this is a fairly rare thing. It last happened 19 years ago between November and February 1999 and February 2000, and of course all kinds of things happening then about the endings and beginnings possibilities coming up. And that's why this time as well, and possibly even more so actually, has a feeling of endings and beginnings. And that is why also I feel that personal decisions that are made at this time, as well as collective national decisions, are going to have a very big impact on our trajectory going forwards for the future. So as well as all those lunations at zero of the signs, we at this time in early November, we have Jupiter at 29 degrees of Scorpio, about to move into Sagittarius, and that's from the 4th to the 8th. And we also have Uranus at 29 degrees. It's retrograded 29 degrees of Aries. That's exact on the 7th, which is the date of the new moon I'm about to talk about. And there are other planets like Chiron coming up next February, 29 degrees of Pisces. So this 29 degrees is quite important as an expression of what that planet's transit through that sign has been about. Now, I'll come back to those in a moment, but we have our new moon at 15:11 of Scorpio. This happens on the 7th of the month. It happens at 8:01 a.m. Pacific and 4:01 p.m. UK time. Now, a new moon is always a new beginning, so see where this falls in your chart and be sure to set a new intention for whatever you want to manifest for this new moon in this area of life where 15 of Scorpio falls for you. Now, Scorpio is the most intensely emotional sign, so you're going to be feeling passionate about something. You're going to be feeling very strongly about something. And it's also the sign of transformation, so this could be really wonderful. You're committing to something, you're setting a clear intention about an area of life that you want to transform, which is really wonderful. Coming back to Uranus, we've got some very strong aspects still with Uranus at this time. Uranus is at 29 degrees of Aries, square to the nodal axis, which is shifted into 29 of Cancer and 29 of Capricorn. So 29 of the cardinals is really going to be resonating at this time. So check if you have any planets round about that, because Uranus is square to that nodal axis really till the end of the year, but it's exact on the 7th when we have this new moon. It can create disruptions or diversions or unexpected eruptive issues coming up, which are quite surprising in terms of where we were headed collectively for the future. It can be sudden breaks in countries' agreements or treaties or that sort of thing. But equally, this can give us quantum leaps, both personally and collectively, in our evolution. Big quantum leaps. Well, Uranus is the planet most connected to magnetism. And one of the very interesting things that's happening at the moment is, and will be continuing, is the magnetism around the Earth is reducing. One of the things that allows is much more galactic and cosmic energy to come through to us. Uranus is the planet of awakening. Many people are waking up spiritually and will continue to, and many more will, with that almost leakage of more galactic energy coming through to us because of the reduced magnetism of the Earth, and Uranus is the planet that symbolizes magnetism. I find this symbolism so rich if you're following. The other aspect to Uranus is a quincunx to Jupiter, because Uranus is at 29 of Aries, Jupiter's at 29 of Scorpio. Uranus is also square to Mars in Aquarius. Now, we had this as a long-running aspect from the middle of May, really for 6 months through the year, and I talked about it a great deal. But all of these aspects really can suggest strong social and civil unrest, strong social activism. And I believe that's going to be happening potentially from November through to March, because Uranus stays at 29 degrees of Aries all the way through to March when it re-enters Taurus until 2026. Now, if you think of the symbolism of Uranus, it's always historically been about fighting for freedom, fighting for equality. And in Aries, it's very much about fighting. Literally protests, riots, that sort of thing. If we go back historically to one of the earlier times that Uranus was at 29 of Aries, this was during the time in America where they were having the great slavery debate. And was there inequality at that time? You betcha there was inequality at that time, but there's still massive inequality in the world. And I believe it won't just be America. It doesn't escape my notice that 7th of November, the new moon, is right on, really, the midterm elections in America. So it isn't just America. I believe we could see some social unrest in the UK with Brexit. Feelings are running very high there, and also potentially in Europe, where the recent elections have produced a sort of the whole raft of more nationalistic governments reflecting Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, nationalism, borders, boundaries, etc. So I hope I'm making myself clear with all this. So it's going to be a fascinating time that is really sort of setting up ahead of all those planets shifting into Aquarius, end of 2020 into 2021 and beyond, the need for much greater equality in societies. But for you personally, this is very much about spiritual awakening. And I would really, considering the new moon is in Scorpio, which is one of the most profound spiritual signs of all of them, set a new intention for your spiritual transformation and see what comes in. I can get some wonderful manifestations from that. Beautifully as well at this new moon on the 7th, we have the sun and moon together trine to Neptune in Pisces at 13 degrees. And this is just really beautiful. This is highly creative. It's a very fine perception, creatively but also spiritually. It's being able to perceive intangibles. It's connecting to source. It's having a sense of the divine in your life. And one of the things I'd really emphasize, which I've talked and written about before, is particularly as we're getting this line up in Capricorn of the South Node, Saturn, Pluto, which is very much about the control of external authority, I would really remind you to tune in to that spiritual compass, to that inner radio dial that gives you the best guidance of the lot. Don't rely on any externals for your guidance. Rely on yourself and your own intuition and your own inner inspiration for your guidance in your life, because that's going to come from a much higher place. In addition to that, at this new moon, we have Venus in its own sign of Libra at 26 degrees of Libra. That's another critical degree, by the way, that's very emphasized, tightly conjunct to Ceres, the asteroid Ceres. So this is literally love of the earth, because Ceres is Mother Earth. It's connected to agriculture, food production. And this is such a message of we have to love our earth. I couldn't emphasize this more strongly, because it's going to become a bigger and bigger message over the coming years to love the earth, pour healing energy into the earth, think very carefully about how we produce our food cleanly as well. But that's really what Ceres conjunct Venus is all about. And again, it reminds us of the beauty and abundance of nature. Along the same theme of creativity and sensitivity, we have Mercury being squared by Neptune. This is at 13 of Sagittarius and 13 of Pisces. And that's going to be running for a few days in the middle of the month, from the 12th to the 19th of the month. That is wonderful for your inspiration, your imagination, your creativity. Mercury also moves retrograde on the 17th at 13 of Sagittarius. This isn't probably the best few days to really attack some very logical, analytical, precise accounting project because the mind is going to be much more divergent at that time, much more creative rather than convergent. But it is a beautiful time to be in nature and just really being very aware of all that Mother Earth offers us. I have such a strong sense of that. But coming back to this new moon, really be very clear as we go through these important lunations coming up at 0 degrees of the signs to set your intention, to know what you want to manifest, and to use your inner guidance as your keel to really guide you through these coming times, because things could be quite lively and colourful on the outside, but it doesn't mean that you can't find complete peace and bliss and calm and joy on the inside too. So hope you've enjoyed this. Lots going on, and even more, I think, in the second half of the month. So enjoy this wonderful first half of November and the new moon in Scorpio. If you'd like more information about my books, my tutorial videos, my ever so long monthly newsletter where I go into much more detail about other topics that I just don't have time to cover in the videos, just you can subscribe on any page on my website, and it's about £1 or $1 a month for a lot of information, so you can go and enjoy that too. Thanks so much for listening. Bye for now.